Howdy readers, I'm Jason, this is Chapter and Verse, and welcome to Shaketember. Let me start off by apologizing that this video is a few days late. I planned on starting All's Well That Ends Well, our first play, a few days before the end of August, but that just didn't pan out, and so then it's like, okay, well, I've got a couple of days to read the play, but I've just been... there's been a lot of things, right, going on lately. I've been really stressed out with work. I've been really exhausted. I've had health things going on, a biopsy, and I had an ultrasound in the last few weeks. I had an EKG in the last few weeks. And so there's been stress about all of that as well. Plus, it's still just hot as hell, and I don't do well in the heat, right? Like, for some reason, I hold on to it, right? Like that scene in X-Men First Class where Kevin Bacon, like the guy throws throw a grenade at him, I think, and Kevin Bacon like catches it and it explodes, and he just internalizes the heat and the explosion and the force of the whole thing. And sometimes I feel that way, right? So like when I take a shower in the morning and drink a cup of hot coffee, I think my body like holds on to all that. And then, you go outside and we're a week into September and it's 95 degrees or it's 98 degrees. The other day it actually hit 100 degrees. So that's no good. So all of these things together have just, over a period of weeks and months, and if you take into consideration as well that I don't get a lot of sleep at night. I would say on average, on any given night, I get probably 5.5 hours of sleep. And being 47 years old and in not the greatest shape I've ever been in, that tends to kind of take its toll and add up. And I've just been really tired. And even though we had a 3-day weekend, on which I fully, planned to read All's Well That Ends Well in its entirety and to make a video, I just didn't have the energy or the brain power to engage with Shakespeare in any kind of meaningful way. And so, I just spent the weekend watching movies that I didn't really have to think about very much for the most part, and just trying to rest. And so I've just been really tired, but I'm feeling reasonably kind of refreshed now, and I've read the play, I've taken notes, and I'm ready to talk about it with you guys. So, All's Well That Ends Well. I first read this 24 years ago as an undergraduate. I had no memory of it. I had no memory even of the scene where they kind of capture and interrogate Parolles in that made-up language. And when I encountered that in the play, like when they first started talking about doing it, I remembered it. And I remembered how funny I found it 24 years ago. So, and it was every bit as funny this time around as well. But, so I came into it pretty fresh, with pretty new eyes, I would say. Here's the edition that I read. Let me get... It's got a little sticky there on the cover. And this edition was sent to us by Kelly's friend Gina. You don't tend to see these Folger Shakespeare Library editions in trade paperbacks. They are usually more like this, right? Little mass market. This is the edition of Coriolanus, the Folger edition of Coriolanus that I'm going to be reading for our this coming weekend, or maybe a couple of days after this coming weekend, if things continue going the way they've been trending. But yeah, so they're usually these little mass markets. So it was nice to read one in trade paperback. I didn't really like the footnotes in this edition very much. There were too many instances of the footnotes too often began with probably or perhaps, and they just weren't terribly helpful. And I wanted the editors to have a little bit more confidence, I suppose, in presenting us the interpretations of some of these more obscure and opaque passages, which leads me to one of my gripes with this play, actually, is that, well, so a couple of things. I felt like it took too long to get going. Yeah, I mean, the plot in earnest, I mean, it really, God, it takes a good act and a half or 2 acts even really to kind of get its wheels turning, I felt like. So that was a problem. It wasn't immediately engaging. And the other problem was I felt like there were more passages in this that were that felt, overly difficult to suss out the meaning of than really there should have been. Like it felt more opaque even than Shakespeare is commonly thought to be, and so that bothered me a little bit. It made me actually think that this might have been an early play. And then when I went and checked, lo and behold, this was written toward the end of his career, during the time of the problem plays, quote unquote. Yeah, so that was a little bit disappointing to realize that I mean, by that time in his career, Shakespeare was perfectly capable of writing texts that were kind of soaring and lucid all throughout, and this one wasn't. It was intermittently, of course, but it wasn't all throughout, and that was unfortunate. Some of the lines and passages that I did really, really love in this include, let's see here. So there was this one from the Countess, and I believe this is when she discovers that her son has just been a total ass with respect to Helen, and yeah, she says, he was my son, but I do wash his name out of my blood, and thou art all my child. And I'm just like, wash his name out of my blood. Like, that is, man, that's strong. It feels very severe, and it was just kind of a rush to read. At one point, Parolles, who is just, Parolles is this character in the play who, is completely in the confidence of the Count, and doesn't deserve to be at all. I mean, he's just a schmuck, right? Like, I mean, he's utterly dishonest, utterly ingratiating. He's just not a good guy. But yeah, he says, "Who cannot be crushed with a plot?" And I thought that was pretty wonderful. Let's see, there's one or two more. Yeah, there was this one. This is so great. Toward the end, when all the revelations are happening, LeFou, who's this nobleman, right, who had intended there at the end of the play to marry his daughter to Bertram, and then of course all the discoveries are sort of laid out, and people realize that Helen is still alive, and so Bertram is hence still married, and LeFou doesn't want Bertram to have anything to do with his daughter. But anyway, everybody is very moved at one point, and LeFou. He's readying to cry, you might say, and he says, "Mine eyes smell onions," which I thought was kind of beautiful and hilarious at the same time. And I told Kelly when I was reading this last night, I read that line. I told her, I said, I'm gonna try really hard to remember to say that in the future. Like whenever we're watching a movie and I feel tears coming on, I'm going to speak aloud, "Mine eyes smell onions." So I just thought that was wonderful. And then there was a speech of Helen's. Helen has so many great speeches in this. So she's, I mean, by far the smartest character in the play. This is in Act 2, Scene 1. She says at one point, "The greatest grace lending grace, ere twice the horses of the sun shall bring their fiery torture his diurnal ring, ere twice in murk and occidental damp moist Hesperus hath quenched her sleepy lamp, or 24 times the pilot's glass hath told the thievish minutes how they pass. What is infirm from your sound parts shall fly, health shall live free, and sickness freely die." I just thought that was just really beautiful. I love that phrase, the thievish minutes, right? The way time steals opportunity and life from us. Just really, really beautiful stuff. And then, of course, maybe the greatest example of Shakespeare's linguistic genius, I suppose, in the play is when they capture paroles, and they so they affect to speak a language that he won't understand, right? So that he'll think that they're enemies of some kind, etc., etc. And then one of them makes to kind of interpret, what is being said, but they're really just speaking gibberish. He has no idea. So they capture Parolles, and then it says, "Alarum within, Lord advancing. Throca movosis, cargo, cargo, cargo. All cargo, 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 Vilianda par corbo cargo." They seize him. Parolles, "Oh, ransom, ransom, do not hide mine eyes." They blindfold him. First soldier, Boscos Thromoldo Boscos. Parolles, "I know you are the Muscos' regiment, and I shall lose my life for want of language. If there be here German or Dane, Low Dutch, Italian or French, let him speak to me. I'll discover that which shall undo the Florentine." First soldier, Boscos Valvadu, "I understand thee, and can speak thy tongue." Carlibonto, sir, betake thee to thy faith, for 17 poignards are at thy bosom. Parolles, oh, it's just so funny. It reminded me, I recently rewatched Bowfinger, the Frank Oz movie written by Steve Martin and starring Steve Martin and Eddie Murphy. And it's too much to kind of go into the plot of the thing, although it's so wild and wonderful. But suffice it to say, Eddie Murphy plays two roles. So he plays Kit Ramsey, right, the biggest movie star in the world, and he plays this kind of hapless, coffee fetching assistant, and the hapless coffee fetching assistant is working with a film crew who are making this dreadful B movie called Chubby Rain. And they can't get financing, right? And they can't get distribution for it unless Kit Ramsey is in it, right? Because Steve Martin he's the director of the film. He's this kind of con artist and stuff. And he said, well, Kit Ramsey will be in it. Well, Kit Ramsey, of course, is not going to be in it. That'd be like getting Tom Cruise in your B movie called Chubby Rain. So the actors who are in Chubby Rain have no idea that Steve Martin hasn't told Kit Ramsey he's going to be in this film. They think that Kit Ramsey is in the film, and that his process is such that he can't talk to any of the other crew, right? He's so method that he has to be kind of in his own zone, and so the actors who are supposed to engage with Kit Ramsey believe that he's acting with them, but he actually has no idea what they're doing. And Kit Ramsey himself has problems with paranoia and conspiracy theories, etc., etc. So there's this scene, and I'll link to it in the description box below, where Kit Ramsey, the actor, he's having lunch in this little bistro out on the street, and he's at this table, and all of a sudden he finds himself alone, and the Chubby Rain crew are filming, right, like, I don't know, half a block away, something like this. And Christine Baranski's character like approaches him, and she just starts talking all this shit about aliens, etc., etc. And he's afraid of aliens, and again, he has no idea that they're acting with him. He has no idea that he's supposed to be acting, and he doesn't understand what the hell she's saying. And this scene in All's Well That Ends Well just reminds me of that, the gibberish, right, and how Parolles is so freaked out by it, and doesn't know what's going on, and just feels completely disoriented, etc., etc. So it reminded me of that part, Bowfinger, which is one of my favorite scenes from that movie. So I will link to that below. A few other things that I wanted to talk about. So before I get to like kind of what I feel like the play is about, there was one scene in the play, right? And the scene is when toward the end, and the King of France is interrogating Diana about the ring, right, which had belonged to Helen, had been given to Helen by the king, etc., etc. everything, all the kind of layers of the onion are being peeled back. This exchange reminded me of another scene from Shakespeare. And I'm curious to know if, when I read it out loud, if any of you will be reminded of that scene as well. And it was just, it was cool to see, because occasionally when you read multiple plays of Shakespeare, the more familiar you become with his work, the more you see it. Like, you see his voice appearing in the plays, right? You see him kind of reappropriating something that he had done in an earlier play, in a later play, and it just carries the trace of his voice with it, and I just think that that's wonderful to spy, I suppose, in the plays. All right, so let's see here. So this is an exchange between the king and Diana. This ring, you say, was yours? Aye, my good lord. Where did you buy it, or who gave it you? It was not given me, nor I did not buy it. Who lent it you? It was not lent me neither. Where did you find it then? I found it not. If it were yours by none of all these ways, how could you give it him? I never gave it him. And then Lafeu says, this woman's an easy glove, my lord. She goes off and on at pleasure. And so the kind of humor and the rhythm of that reminded me a lot of the gravedigger scene in Hamlet, right? So that's in Act 5, Scene 1 here. Whose grave's this, sirrah? Mine, sir. Oh, a pit for clay for to be made. I think it be thine indeed, for thou liest in it. You lie out on it, sir, and therefore 'tis not yours. For my part, I do not lie in it, yet it is mine. Thou dost lie in it, to be in it, and say it is thine. 'Tis for the dead, not for the quick, therefore thou liest. 'Tis a quick lie, sir, 'twill away again from me to you. What man dost thou dig it for? For no man, sir. What woman, then? For none neither. Who is to be buried in it? One that was a woman, sir, but rest her soul, she's dead. How absolute the knave is. And so it just reminded me so much of that in both cases, in Hamlet and then in The King of France. We see these characters trying to get to the bottom of something, trying to get the explanation of something, and it seems like it should be obvious, but the person that they're talking to is just sort of talking in circles and not giving them anything to work with. So Hamlet was written before All's Well That Ends Well. And when I read that exchange in All's Well That Ends Well, it just makes me feel like Shakespeare had the gravedigger scene in mind when he was writing it. And so similar is the kind of tempo and the humor of the scene and the exchange. So anyway, so that was really cool to see. Getting to what I feel like the play is about. So Kelly and I were talking about this yesterday evening, and we actually found ourselves awake in the middle of the night. With my difficulty sleeping, and I had really bad heartburn in the night. And so we found ourselves talking about All's Well That Ends Well, which actually led Kelly at one point to say, God, we're such nerds. Which I suppose is true. I suppose it's part of the reason why we're married. So there's this whole, like, Kelly was telling me yesterday evening, that she was bothered by, because I was like, Helen is the smartest character in the play. And Kelly agreed, and she said, which makes it more difficult than ever to understand why she still wants Bertram at the end. Like, the guy he's such an asshole, clearly. Why does she still want him? And I think it's a great question. It's a valid question, right? And if the play had answered it more clearly, like, I would probably like the play even more. So All's Well That Ends Well seems to me to be a play at its core that is about the tension between fate with a capital F and self-governance or self-determination, right? So there is all this talk in the play about stars, right? Being born beneath this star or that star, right? And how that will prescribe your destiny. And if we look, so there's an illustration in this edition, astrologers determining a baby's quote-unquote stars, right? So it's like an old woodcut from 1580. Let's see if you can see that there. And it reminds me actually of my favorite line from Much Ado About Nothing. I think it's Beatrice who says, there was a star danced, and under that was I born. Right, so there's this idea that the stars, that the heavens, determine our destinies, and we see it all throughout. All's Well That Ends Well. There's quite a lot of discussion of it. So in Act 1, Scene 1, Helen says this: that wishing well had not a body in it which might be felt, that we, the poorer born, whose baser stars do shut us up in wishes, might with effects of them follow our friends, and show what we alone must think, which never returns us thanks. Excuse me. But it's that line, whose baser stars do shut us up in wishes. Okay, so we were born without advantage. We were born without blessing, right? We are poor. We are the unfortunate, etc., etc., and so therefore, we are shut up in wishes, right? We can forever kind of, kick our heels at opportunity, but nothing ever sort of pans out for us. Nothing ever comes our way. And what I love about what Helen does in this play, she appropriates the language, right, of stars in an effort to assert control over her fate. Okay, and she does this in a couple of places. So earlier in that same scene, she is talking about how she feels about Bertram, right? My imagination carries no favor in it but Bertram's. I am undone. There is no living, none, if Bertram be away. 'Twere all one that I should love a bright particular star, and think to wed it. He is so above me. What I love about this is that she refers to Bertram as a star, right? A bright particular star, right? She has singled him out as the object of her affection. She thinks to wed him, right? So it's this idea, she's using the language in the context or in the framing of her negotiating in her own mind, taking control of her own fate, right? Which is really beautiful, which is really cool. In Act 1, Scene 3, we have her saying this, right? She's talking about this medication that her father, who had been an apothecary, right, of real genius, had made, right? And the King of France is dying, right? He has this lesion on his chest that sort of nothing has been able to heal. And she has this medicine that she thinks might do him good. And she says, there's something in it more than my father's skill, which was the greatest of his profession, that his good receipt shall for my legacy be sanctified by the luckiest stars in heaven. And would your honor but give me leave to try success, I'd venture the well-lost life of mine on his grace's cure by such a day and hour, right? So this idea that she's appropriating the verbiage of fate, right, by the luckiest stars in heaven. And, in a context of her trying to take control of her destiny, right, trying to heal the king, by means of which she'll be able to then choose her own husband. And I just think that's really, really lovely, right? So again, right, the play seems to me to be about kind of struggling up from beneath the weight of having one's destiny imposed on one, and determining for yourself what it is. And I think Helen is a really wonderful character as far as that goes. Like I said, she's so much smarter than anyone else in the play, and and she kind of talks rings around them, and she sees things, right? She's like she's playing a game of chess, and she can see the board, and she can see many moves ahead, unlike anyone else in the play. And so to bring this back around to, so why does Helen then still want Bertram at the end, since Bertram is such an ass. He's through to the very end of the play. He's an ass. And I told Kelly, I said, for me, it's because Helen chose him rather than that she was given to him. So it I don't know, it aligns really nicely, I think, with the notion that she's going to choose her future. Like the stars be damned. And if that means that, he's going to be an asshole, well, he's the asshole that she chose. Last thing I wanted to say, too, is that the title reminds me of the refrain from The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel. Dev Patel's character, right, the hotel manager in that, he's always saying, everything will be all right in the end, and if it's not all right, it's not yet the end. And, I don't know that they had All's Well That Ends Well in mind when that script was written, but I wouldn't be surprised. So anyway, there are my thoughts on All's Well That Ends Well. Let me know if you read it, or if you read it in the past, and what you think of it. I hope I'm not making any promises, because it's just been a crazy time. But with any luck, I'll have a video up by Sunday on Coriolanus. Although that may not happen, because I have to work on Saturday. I have to work an event that's 6 hours long, and it's going to be like, I'm going to be around 1,500 people indoors, and I'm not looking forward to that at all. I'll be wearing my N95 mask the whole time, and and so we'll feel, I'm sure, exhausted by the end of that. So who knows? But there will be a video on Coriolanus from me before long. So let me know if you're participating in Shaketember, what you thought of All's Well That Ends Well. And I will talk to you guys again very soon. Adios.